can run from the call, but you cannot outrun the sea's creator. I thought the deep would erase me. They asked why the sea wanted us dead. And the answer was me. I feared the Lord, and still I ran. Something was waiting, and it knew my name. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, "Salvation belongs to the Lord." And the call came again, the same words. I walked toward the enemy, not with confidence, with obedience. Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. They believed, and the city bowed low. Who knows, God may relent. And that mercy felt like injustice. Should I not pity Nineveh, that great city? Then why did you choose me?
Scripture Cinema Films.
I tried to outrun mercy.
Have you ever tried to run from God? Seriously, have you ever been so convinced that your own sense of justice, your own anger, was more righteous than divine mercy? I have, and I learned something in the deep that I did not want to learn on land. You cannot outrun the one who made the ground under your feet, the wind in your lungs, and the sea that carries ships like splinters. If you try, you do not escape him. You only discover how far his mercy is willing to follow. Right now, I speak to you from a place no man chooses, a living prison under the sea. Darkness so thick it feels like weight. Air that tastes wrong, walls that move, slick and warm. Tightening and releasing with the slow strength of a creature large enough to swallow a man and keep him breathing. This is not a story about a fish. Not really. This is the story of a man who needed to be swallowed by a monster just to be saved from himself. And before I tell you how I came to be buried alive, I need you to carry 2 questions with me, because these questions followed me into the water and they will not let go. Why did the Lord choose me for Nineveh, when my heart was the last place mercy wanted to live? And why did he choose this measure of time in the deep? Long enough to taste death, long enough to break a man, but not long enough to finish him. I did not know the answers when the sea shut above my head. I only knew the sound of my own stubbornness. In the quiet hills of Gath-Hepher.
Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city.
Nineveh, Lord, my heart resists your mercy.
That was my home. That was where my name was spoken as if it meant something gentle.
Jonah, dove, peace was my name, but peace was not in me.
A name that sounded like peace, even though peace was the last thing I felt.
I spoke before kings, but the shadow was already moving.
I was not just a man passing through life. I was a prophet. I had spoken the word of the Lord to kings. I had seen decisions made in rooms heavy with power.
What news comes from the eastern road?
Assyria, they move like a storm you cannot bargain with.
And I had watched the Lord's will unfold on the stage of nations. In those days, Jeroboam II sat on Israel's throne. The land tasted a fragile prosperity, a thin calm that made people believe tomorrow would look like today. But even in that calm, there was a shadow stretching over the horizon. Assyria. That name did not live in books for us. It lived in the stomach. It lived in the way men spoke lower when travelers brought news. It lived in the way old soldiers stared too long at the eastern road. It was the feeling that something vast was moving, and sooner or later it would reach us. And at the center of that shadow stood a city that sounded like a curse when spoken aloud. Nineveh. Magnificent, sprawling, the heart of an empire that built its reputation on conquest and fear. Their armies were relentless. Their rulers boasted of terror as if it were wisdom. Whole nations bent under them, not only because of strength, but because of the dread that came before strength arrived. To Israel, Nineveh was not simply a rival. It was the embodiment of everything that stood against the Lord and against his people. In my mind, the people of Nineveh were beyond hope.
Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it.
It was into that simmering fire of politics and hatred and history that the word of the Lord came to me, not as a suggestion, not as an idea, as a command, clear and undeniable, cutting through my ordinary life like a blade through cloth. Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their evil has come up before me. Imagine what those words did inside me. If the Lord had told me to speak against Nineveh from the safety of Israel, I would have done it. If he had told me to pray for their downfall, I would have prayed until my voice cracked. If he had told me to announce their destruction from afar, I would have felt something like satisfaction.
I wanted judgment from far away. The Lord asked me to walk into it. He told me to go, and my heart recoiled.
But he told me to go, to walk into the heart of the beast, to stand in the streets of the enemy, to speak where their power was strongest, and he did not tell me to pronounce their end with certainty.
Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city.
I feared your mercy more than their walls.
He told me to cry out against them, and I knew what that could mean. Because when the Lord exposes evil, he does not always do it to destroy. Sometimes he exposes to heal. Sometimes he warns to give room for turning. Sometimes judgment is delayed by mercy, and mercy feels like an offense to those who have been hurt. I could already see it. I could already hear it. The possibility that my words might land, that the people I hated might listen, that the city I wanted erased might bow low and plead for forgiveness. And if they did, I knew what God would do. That was the problem. I knew his character too well. I knew the God of justice was also merciful and compassionate, slow to anger, and that he could turn back from destroying people. I had seen him forgive. I had heard him call broken men back into light. I had watched him hold back the hand that should have fallen. And I did not want that goodness spent on them. So my heart recoiled. National pride rose in me like a sickness. Religious certainty hardened into rebellion. A thought formed, quiet but poisonous. The Lord should care about us, not them. The Lord should punish them, not warn them. It felt like a violation of order, like mercy was being offered in the wrong direction. And that is when my fear revealed itself. I was not afraid of Nineveh's walls. I was afraid of God's grace. Afraid that I would obey, and that obedience would become the instrument of mercy I did not want to witness. So I ran. Not subtly, not with a slow drift away. I ran like a man sprinting from a fire, and I chose the direction that made the rebellion obvious. The Lord said, "Go east." I went west.
The Lord said east, I went west. Down to Joppa, where noise makes a man believe he can disappear.
Down to the coast, down to Joppa, where the air was thick with salt and the streets were filled with languages I did not know. Joppa was a place a man could vanish. Commerce made people blind to faces. Money made everyone polite. If you had the fare, no one asked too many questions. And in Joppa, I found what my rebellion wanted. A ship bound for Tarshish. Far, distant, the edge of the known world. The opposite of Nineveh, not only in direction, but in meaning. Tarshish was escape made into a destination. I paid the fare. The coins clinked into the captain's palm, and the sound was small, ordinary, almost laughable compared to the weight of what I was doing. A simple transaction sealing a cosmic refusal. I stepped onto the ship among pagan sailors, men hardened by wind and water.
Tarshish, that is far.
Far is the point.
Men who trusted the sea because they had survived it. Their hands moved with practiced ease. Their faces were carved by sun. They laughed and cursed and hauled rope as if the world could be managed by skill. For a moment, I felt relief. A false relief, like a man inhaling before the truth hits. As the ship pulled away from the dock, as the shoreline shrank and the familiar land of Israel became a fading line, I told myself I had done it. I told myself the Lord would choose another messenger. I told myself I would be free of the call. I went down into the ship, deeper into shadow, as if the physical descent could match the spiritual one. I found a corner in the innermost hold where the air was warm and the light thin, where the sounds of the deck above became muffled and distant. And then I slept. Not the sleep of peace, the sleep of denial. I slept while the Lord watched. I slept while the sea waited. I slept while the question that would define my life began to form in heaven's silence. Could a prophet run from the presence of the Lord? The first sign was subtle, easy to ignore if you wanted to believe the world was neutral. The wind changed.
I slept and the wind changed. The wind changed, and I pretended not to hear it.
The steady breath that fills sails turned sharp, like a warning. The sky bruised into gray. The ship's timbers creaked in a different way. Not the comfortable groan of travel, but the strained complaint of something being pushed beyond its design. I did not see it. I was below. I was hiding. But even in sleep, I felt the shift. The first lurch, the first hard slap of water against the hull. The way loose cargo rolled, then rolled again, harder this time. Then the ship jolted so violently that the world in the hold seemed to twist. Something crashed nearby. A shout tore through the deck above, raw with fear. And still I tried to sink deeper into sleep, as if I could bury myself inside my own refusal. That is what running from God looks like in the beginning. Not dramatic heroism, not a grand speech, just a man choosing unconsciousness while the storm gathers. Above me, footsteps thundered, voices rose, rope snapped tight, barrels shifted, men cried out.
Pray, Hebrew. Call on your God.
I had no words, only fear.
Not as sailors making routine adjustments, but as men who suddenly understood the sea had become hostile. Their prayers followed, desperate words in foreign tongues. Each man calling to whatever God he had trusted since childhood, and the sound of cargo being thrown overboard, one heavy splash after another, as if wealth could buy a moment of life. The storm grew louder. The ship groaned like it might split. Water began to find its way through cracks, cold fingers reaching down into the darkness where I lay. My eyes opened, not fully, not with clarity, more like a man waking into a nightmare he does not yet recognize as judgment. Then the hatch above burst open, and a shape blocked what little light there was. The captain's silhouette filled the doorway, framed by chaos. His voice cut down into the hold like a whip, furious, incredulous, afraid. What do you mean, you sleeper?
Then his voice cut the dark. What do you mean, you sleeper? His voice hit me like a slap, and my mind ran home.
What do you mean, you sleeper? The captain's voice hit me like a slap, cutting through the darkness of the hold, through the heavy warmth of old wood and damp rope, through the stubborn comfort I had tried to build out of denial. I blinked up at him, and for a moment I could not understand why his face looked like that, why his eyes were so wide, why the air above the deck sounded like the world was tearing. Then the ship lurched, hard enough to throw my shoulder into a beam. Something crashed nearby.
Arise! Call upon your God!
I heard it and remembered what I tried to forget.
Water hissed and slapped against planks. Men shouted names of gods I did not serve, as if volume could change fate. "What do you mean?" he shouted again, closer now, shaking me. "You sleeper, arise, call upon your God." And as he spoke the words, a strange thing happened inside me. Not a thought, a memory, a flash of dust and stillness, a dry wind over hills, the taste of ordinary days before I chose rebellion. Because this did not begin on a ship. It began in Israel, under a sky that looked calm, while the world was quietly changing. I was raised in the northern hills, in a place where the land is stubborn and the stones remember every footstep. In those days, people still spoke of the Lord with familiarity, even when their lives did not match their words. We had altars, we had songs, we had festivals that felt like certainty. We had the comfort of thinking the Lord belonged to us. But comfort is a fragile thing when empires start moving.
Comfort feels permanent until the world starts to move. It looked like peace, but the East was already in our stomachs.
During the reign of Jeroboam, son of Joash, Israel tasted prosperity that felt almost like peace. Markets filled, fields yielded, men walked with confidence, as if tomorrow was guaranteed. And yet, if you listened closely, you could hear the tension under the laughter, a careful pause in conversation whenever the East was mentioned, a tightening around the eyes of soldiers who pretended they were relaxed. Assyria was not just a name. It was pressure on the edge of the map. Traders spoke of their roads, their armies, their kings who ruled with a cold kind of intelligence. People whispered stories of cities that resisted and then vanished, of nations that were swallowed and reshaped, of fear used like a weapon long before steel arrived. Whether every story was true hardly mattered. The point was the same. Assyria did not simply conquer, it made men feel small.
Assyria presses closer each season.
Names become weight before armies arrive.
And at the heart of it all was Nineveh. Even the sound of the word felt wrong in my mouth, like saying it invited it closer. Nineveh was vast, powerful, loud with idols and ambition. To Israel, it was the nightmare on the horizon, the place where cruelty and pride seemed to sit on a throne. When my people pictured enemies, they pictured that city. When they prayed for judgment, they prayed toward that direction. I was a prophet in those days. That sentence sounds clean. It did not feel clean. To be a prophet is to be interrupted by God. It is to have your plans cut short by a voice that speaks as if it owns your breath, because it does. It is to carry words that can lift men or crush them, and to know you did not invent those words. I had spoken before, not for my own honor, but because the Lord had placed his message in me, and I had learned that resisting him was never simple. I had stood near kings. I had watched power shift. I had seen the Lord act in ways that made confident men suddenly unsure. So when the word of the Lord came to me again, it was not unfamiliar. What was unfamiliar was what he asked.
The voice was familiar. The request was not. It looked ordinary until the certainty arrived.
It came in a moment that looked ordinary. The sky was the same. The hills were the same. Life was moving at its usual pace. And then the voice arrived, not as thunder, but with a certainty that left no room to pretend I had imagined it. Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it. Nineveh.
Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it.
You leave a door open, and I hated that door.
My heart tightened instantly, and not with fear of their walls, with outrage. Because I understood what the Lord was doing. I understood what was hidden inside the command. He did not say, "Go and announce destruction." He said, "Cry out against it. Warn them, confront them. Expose their evil before heaven and earth." And whenever the Lord warns, He leaves a door open. That door is called repentance. I felt my mind fill with arguments faster than prayer. I told myself I was being righteous. I told myself I was defending justice. I told myself the Lord must surely agree with me if He knew how much these people deserved judgment. But the Lord already knew their evil. That was the whole reason He spoke. And still He sent me. I tried to imagine it, me, an Israelite, walking into the center of their power, speaking words that could change their fate. My stomach turned. Not because I believed they would kill me. They might, but I could accept that. Death is clean compared to what I feared most. I feared the possibility that my words would work, because I knew the Lord's heart. I had seen it too many times. The Lord is not only just, He is merciful. He is patient in a way that feels dangerous to angry men. He can look at a sinner and see more than the sin. He can delay judgment long enough for a heart to turn. I carried those truths like a creed when it benefited my people. But when the Lord aimed that mercy at my enemy, the creed became a wound. A sentence formed in me, ugly and honest. "They do not deserve your compassion." And another sentence followed it, even worse. "If you forgive them, what does that make of our suffering?" I did not say these things out loud then. I kept them inside, where they could pretend to be holy. That is how pride survives. It dresses itself like conviction, but the Lord sees under every disguise. I remember standing there after the command, silent, as if silence could negotiate, as if the Lord would revise His words when He realized how impossible they felt to me. The voice did not revise, it waited. And the waiting was its own pressure. The kind of pressure that forces you to decide what you truly believe, not what you sing, not what you claim, what you obey.
Silence could not negotiate. The waiting demanded an answer. Nineveh was a word that carried weight.
Nineveh was not just far. The word does not carry the weight it carried in my chest. It was a machine that swallowed nations, everything my people feared losing. Land, freedom, identity, safety. To go there was to step into the symbol of what threatened us. So when the Lord commanded me, it felt like betrayal. I told myself I could not do this. I told myself He would not truly require it. But the quiet after the command revealed what should have sobered me, and instead made me angry.
Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it.
It felt like betrayal.
The Lord was not confused. He was deliberate. He chose me, knowing my heart. Why me? Why put His message in a mouth that wanted judgment, not mercy? Why set my feet toward Nineveh when every part of me wanted to walk anywhere else? Was He trying to save Nineveh or expose what lived in me? Another thought flashed, and I tried to crush it. The Lord had already prepared something, not in Nineveh, not in Assyria, but for me. I could not name it then, only the unease of being caught in a design I did not understand. Why would the path demand burial before obedience? Why measure time in darkness as if darkness was part of the lesson? I felt trapped, so I ran. Not a careful delay, but a sprint, as if distance could erase the call. I did not believe God could not find me. I only wanted to pretend the voice was no longer mine. My own knowledge accused me. You are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger. That was what terrified me, because if I went, they might repent. If they repented, the Lord might spare them, and I would have to watch mercy land on the people I believed deserved judgment. So I chose a different site. I chose the sea, and as the sun sank, the salt air of Joppa met my face like a breath waiting to become my escape.
So I chose the sea. Joppa was loud enough to make a man believe he could disappear.
Joppa was loud enough to make a man believe he could disappear. Stone and salt and constant motion. Fish, tar, wet rope. Merchants shouting in foreign tongues. Sailors laughing as if they could mock the sea first. Donkeys groaning under spice and oil. In a port city, everyone moves, and no one studies your face for long. I told myself that was why I came, to be lost among strangers. But Joppa was really the last place I could pretend God's command was negotiable. In Israel's hills, silence feels holy. Here, noise buries conviction. Still, the words stayed lodged in my chest. Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city. Nineveh was east. Every step I took toward the docks was west. I should have felt fear. Instead, I felt that cold determination a man calls virtue when he is protecting his anger. I told myself I was defending justice, refusing to be the instrument of mercy, and beneath the excuses a warning pulsed. If the Lord chose me knowing my heart, maybe this was not only about Nineveh. I pushed it down, so I turned practical. Find a ship, find distance. At the docks, ships sat like dark beasts, hulls scarred, sails furled. Sailors moved with easy skill. I watched them and felt envy. They could choose a direction, and the voice of prophecy would not follow. Then I heard the word that made escape feel purchasable. Tarshish, the edge of the known world. The farthest refusal. I approached the vessel. The captain, thick-armed and weathered, looked me over with quick calculation. I need passage. To Tarshish, he said, testing. I said passage. He held out his hand. I dropped the coins into his palm. The clink was ordinary, almost laughable against what it sealed. He nodded once and turned away. I stood staring at the ship like a door, because I knew what I was doing. I was fleeing from the presence of Yahweh. Even now it sounds absurd. How does a creature flee its creator? In that moment, I did not care.
To Tarshish, that is far.
Far is the point.
I climbed aboard. The deck was rough beneath my sandals, wet wood and salt in my nose. Sailors passed without a second glance. I moved inward, away from the rail, telling myself the sea was freedom. The sea was distance, but the sea was also the Lord's, and that truth pricked like a thorn. A sailor brushed past with rope and nodded. You travel far, far enough. He chuckled and walked on. As the ship prepared to leave, I watched Joppa shrink, watched men become small, watched Israel hold steady behind the city like a memory. I waited for guilt. I waited for the voice to strike again and stop me. Only the wind answered.
I waited for the voice. Only the wind answered. Relief is not peace. It is the lie that a door can stay locked.
There was only the noise of departure. Orders shouted. Ropes pulled. Sails caught wind. The ship leaned into open water with a long groan of wood. As the shore receded, relief washed over me. Not peace, relief, like a man locking a door and pretending it cannot be opened. I breathed salt air and repeated my lies. The Lord would choose another prophet. Nineveh would be judged without me. My life would return to normal, but two questions stayed lodged in me. Why did the Lord choose me? And why did his command feel like more than a mission, like a mirror? We pushed west until the coastline became a blur, then only memory. The sailors laughed and worked. I tried to wear the same calm. Then it came, not silence of sound, but the absence that only a prophet notices. The silence of God. When the Lord speaks, everything sharpens. His voice has weight. Now I felt only the absence, no command, no correction, no thunder. It should have comforted me. Instead, it felt like the calm before something breaks. So I left the rail and went down into the ship, down into the hold where cargo was stacked and the air smelled of wine, oil, and damp rope. Each step felt like a confession, down from obedience, down into denial. I lay between crates, half hidden, letting the ship's rocking pretend to be escape. But Nineveh followed me into the dark, and the command returned, small and cutting. Arise. I tried to drown it in practical thoughts, distance, time, Tarshish. Yet Tarshish no longer looked like freedom. It looked like an argument I was losing. Because deep down I knew the Lord had not spoken by accident. If he sent me east, he intended something to happen. And if I refused, he would not simply let me go. The Lord pursues, like a father who will not abandon his child to foolishness. Arise.
It followed me into the dark.
That thought birthed a darker one. If he pursues me, what will he use? Men, circumstances, the sea itself. I pushed it away, forced my body still, and exhaustion won. Above me, the ship continued west. The sky changed, and far beyond my closed eyes, the wind began to shift.
I slept and the wind began to change. It began as almost nothing, a creak that lingered too long.
At first it was nearly nothing, a change in rhythm, a creak in the rigging that lingered too long, footsteps above that were running, not walking. Then the ship lurched, and my shoulder hit wood. I opened my eyes into dimness. Another lurch followed, stronger. Shouts broke overhead, and under it all came a sound that didn't belong to a peaceful voyage. The sea. Its roar grew until it became force. The hull shuddered like a living thing trying to throw us off. A crate slammed a beam. Wood groaned. Water rushed over the deck, and soaked feet hammered the planks. I sat up, heart racing. It is a strange thing to run from God and then meet him in the one place you thought would hide you. The hatch burst open. Cold air poured down with salt spray and panic. The captain filled the doorway, rain and sea on his face, and he seized my shoulder. What do you mean, sleeper? Arise, call on your God. Maybe your God will notice us so that we won't perish. The words hit deeper than his grip. Call on your God. The command I had refused on land returned at sea. Another impact slammed the ship and the lantern swung, throwing broken light. Move, he barked, fear sharpening every syllable. I climbed. The ladder shook under my hands. Water dripped down. When my head rose through the opening, the storm revealed itself.
Arise, call on your God, so that we won't perish.
The command I refused on land returned at sea.
Sky bruised black, wind howling, waves rising too high, rope snapped tight. The ship groaned as if it might split. Men who had laughed hours earlier moved like hunted animals. They dragged cargo to the rail and threw it into the dark, splash after heavy splash, as if wealth could buy breath, and they prayed, each man to his own God, shouting names into the wind. I stood among them like stone, because I knew the Lord had hurled this wind. If the sea belongs to him, then the sea can speak when a prophet refuses. A wave knocked a sailor down. The captain turned on me again. Rage and fear twisted together. Pray, he demanded. Do something. I opened my mouth and nothing came. Not because I had never prayed, but because prayer would mean admitting the Lord was here and I had not escaped. What if God's mercy reaches farther than my anger allows?
What if mercy reaches farther than my anger allows?
The ship lurched again, and the captain's jaw clenched. When the sailors realized their prayers were not bending the storm, reason broke and desperation took its place. Someone shouted, "Come, let's cast lots, that we may know for whose cause this evil is on us." Marked pieces passed from palm to palm, slick with rain, fingers trembling as if the wind itself could see what they held. It wasn't a game anymore, it was an appeal to the unseen.
Cast lots, now. We need to know.
A way to drag truth into the open. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with cold. If the Lord had aimed this wind, the lot would not be chance. The circle tightened, time narrowed, wind screamed, timbers groaned, and the lot fell on me. Every face turned. Fear shifted from waves to meaning. Questions burst out like water through a cracked hull. Tell us, please, for whose cause this evil is on us. What is your occupation? Where do you come from? They did not care who I was, only that their lives were ending, and the ending had my name on it.
You fear Yahweh, the maker of the sea.
Yes, and I fled him.
I could have lied. I could have bought a few more breaths with a story. But the storm was already a witness, and something in me finally bent. I heard my own voice cut through the wind, steady in a way that surprised even me. I am a Hebrew, and I fear Yahweh, the God of heaven, who has made the sea and the dry land. The words hit me as I spoke them. I feared him, and yet I had fled him. He made the sea, and I had tried to hide inside it. Their eyes widened. A deeper dread entered them, colder than the rain. "What is this that you have done?" the captain shouted, disbelief and fury tangled together, as if he could not understand a man provoking the Creator and then boarding a ship. The sea answered by growing worse. Waves hammered the hull with heavy impacts. The deck slickened, lantern light shook under the storm's breath. Men ran for the rigging, ropes snapping tight. But their eyes kept returning to me as if they expected the wind to speak my name aloud. Then they asked the question that held my life like a knife. "What shall we do to you, that the sea may be calm for us?" The answer sat in my throat like a stone. Once spoken, it could not be taken back. Another lurch, a wave broke over the rail and drove men to their knees. The captain braced against the mast as if he could steady the world. They waited for my words, strangers holding my fate with shaking hands. In that pause, one thought flashed clear. If the Lord could aim a storm at one man, he could also aim mercy at one city, even Nineveh. So I spoke.
Throw me into the sea, and it will be calm for you.
Take me up and throw me into the sea, then the sea will be calm for you. For I know that because of me this great storm is on you. They hated the sentence the way men hate a verdict. "No," someone shouted, "we can still make shore." They seized the oars and fought, muscles strained, veins stood out, faces clenched. The ship turned, then the wind shoved it back like a child. One oar snapped, the water did not yield. They were not fighting the sea, they were fighting the maker of it. The captain looked at me again, and I saw surrender there, not hatred. He wanted his men to live. He wanted the ship to survive. And he knew the storm had decided the terms. Still, they did not throw me immediately. First, they prayed. Not to their gods, to mine. The captain lifted his face into the rain and cried, "Please, Yahweh, don't let us perish for this man's life, and don't lay on us innocent blood. For you, Yahweh, have done as it pleased you." Then hands closed on my arms and legs, strong, calloused, shaking hands. I was lifted, my feet leaving the deck, the sea rising and falling below like something breathing.
Please, Yahweh, don't let us perish for this man's life.
Darkness beyond the rail looked endless, and in that suspended instant, I felt something I did not expect, not terror, clarity. If the Lord wanted me dead, I would be dead. If he wanted me alive, no sea could keep me. The thought did not comfort me, it humbled me. It proved my running had always been foolish. They carried me to the rail. The captain hesitated one last heartbeat, eyes meeting mine. I saw the question he could not afford to ask, and I had no answer that would fit inside a storm. So I gave him only the truth of my face. I did not fight. I did not plead. I let them obey. They heaved. The world flipped.
Cold air, then the sea struck me like a wall. The shock stole my breath.
Bitter water filled my mouth as my body sank under the weight of soaked clothing. Above, the ship was only a dark shape against darker sky. Then something happened so fast, it felt impossible. The storm stopped, not gradually, not easing, as if a hand had closed. The wind died. The roar collapsed. Waves flattened. The sea, moments ago enraged, became still. For a heartbeat, I thought I had imagined it. But the stillness pressed in, like a restraint laid over the world. Even as I sank, I could picture the deck above, men frozen, soaked, mouths open, staring at calm water where chaos had been. The fear on their faces was no longer fear of drowning, it was awe. Storms do not end like that unless something greater than storms commands them. I fell deeper, and the last threads of sound thinned. My lungs burned. Panic flared and failed. Light faded fast, the surface becoming a dim glow. Then only memory, one thought, cut through the water like pain. They are safe. The ship is safe, and I am alone. Weeds brushed my skin and wrapped around my head like a cold crown. Pressure increased. My chest tightened. My strength drained. This was the judgment I had chosen, not judgment on Nineveh. Judgment on me. And yet, as the last light unraveled into black, the sea around me changed again. Not a wave, not a current. A vast movement, something living and enormous, sliding beneath me with quiet certainty. The deep below seemed to open. A shape rose, patient and unstoppable. In the darkness, a mouth widened like a gate. There was no time to fight, no breath to scream. Water rushed, pressure closed, and I was pulled inward, swallowed whole, the sea's judgment giving way to a darker kind of mercy. At first, there was still a faint glow above, a trembling veil where the surface held the world I had left behind. But that light stayed where air lived, where voices lived, where men believed they could bargain with God. I sank. Water pressed against my eyes and filled my ears. Sound became distant, muffled, as if the ocean were swallowing not only my body but my last connection to the world. My lungs burned, instinct screamed for air, but there was only salt and cold. I clawed at nothing. I kicked against a weight that did not care. The sea does not respond to panic. It responds only to the one who commands it. Weeds tightened around my head and shoulders. For a moment I fought, ripping at strands, but each movement only tangled me deeper. Then the fight drained away, not because I chose surrender, but because the deep makes choices for you when strength runs out. So this is how it ends, I thought. Not in Nineveh, not beneath Assyrian walls, not by an enemy's blade, but here, under the indifferent weight of God's own creation, drowning in the very place I chose as escape. And in that thought was something worse than fear, a terrible clarity. I was not dying because I was unlucky. I was dying because I refused. The storm had been warning. The lot had been a finger pointing. The calm sea after my fall had been a sign so obvious even pagans trembled.
Why would God rescue a man by swallowing him?
And still I had chosen my own way to the last breath. My mind frayed into flashes. Nineveh, faces of my people, the command, arise. The captain's shout, call on your God. The clink of coins in a man's hand as I paid for passage. Then one thought rose above the rest, heavier than the water. I am driven away from your sight. Not simply drowning, being erased. A prophet cut off, sinking to a place where words could not travel, where prayers would die before they rose, where the presence of God felt impossibly far. I had always believed the Lord sees everything. I had lived as if it were true. But in the deep, with breath running out, the old belief turned into terror. Because if the Lord sees everything, then he sees me here too, and he is letting me fall. Green became blue, blue became dark, dark became black. And at the moment I expected only the end, I felt the sea shift again. A displacement, a tightening, the sensation of something immense moving through water with the confidence that does not need speed. At first I thought it was imagination, the final confusion of a dying mind. Then I felt it again, closer. The weeds at my head stirred as the water began to flow in a new direction, drawn toward a pull beneath me. The blackness began to feel crowded. Then the water surged, not with the slap of storm waves, but with a smooth, sudden rush, as if the sea had opened a path. I was pulled like a leaf in a river, weightless and powerless, drawn toward something that had already decided. The darkness ahead widened. A presence formed, not seen but felt. Then it opened, a mouth, a gate in the deep. Shock replaced fear. This was not an accident of nature. This was an appointment. The Lord had prepared something here, in the place where I expected only judgment. And as I crossed that threshold, as the world narrowed into pressure and darkness and the slow closing of living walls, the last thought I carried was not a prayer. It was a question. Why would God rescue a man by swallowing him? The mouth closed, the sea was outside, and I was inside the darkness that breathed. The first breath tasted wrong, thick, wet, sour, carrying the stench of the deep and the heat of living flesh. I coughed and the sound came back muffled. My hands struck something that yielded and tightened at the same time. Not stone, muscle. The truth hit me in pieces. I could still hear the ocean outside, distant like a dream, and beneath it something closer and heavier. A heartbeat. Slow, immense. It pulsed through the walls and through my bones. I was not in a cave. I was inside a creature. The Lord had appointed a great fish. In daylight, the sentence sounds clean. Here it felt like burial in a breathing tomb. The fish shifted and the chamber rolled. I slid across slick flesh. Walls tightened and released in slow waves. I tried to sit up and struck my head on the ceiling of my prison. Everything I touched felt alive. Panic surged. I pushed against the wall. It yielded and held, elastic and unbreakable. No exit, no light, no direction. Only the slow, patient movement of my living grave carrying me through the deep.
The storm stopped, as if a hand had closed.
This is too far. This is too much.
The fish rolled again, and I slammed onto my side. Bitter air filled my mouth. I gagged, and the sound vanished into pulsing walls. Anger snapped inside me, raw and helpless. "This is too far," I whispered. "This is too much." The answer was a heartbeat. Thump, thump. No argument, no explanation, only the steady proof that I was being kept alive by a power I could not resist. I tried to count time to keep my mind from dissolving. Breaths, heartbeats, but my own rhythm kept changing, racing with panic, slowing with exhaustion. The fish's heart never hurried. It was too slow, too vast, like counting the steps of a mountain. Time blurred into fragments. Sleep came in torn scraps, then vanished. Hunger rose, then turned to nausea. Thirst burned, then dulled because the air itself was wet and wrong. Sometimes the creature moved faster and the chamber tilted sharply, tossing me. Sometimes it glided and the walls seemed to breathe around me. I could not tell if a day had passed or only a long stretch of terror, but I knew this. I was not dead, and I did not deserve to be alive. That was when my pride began to crack. Even there, I tried to defend myself. I replayed the command and my refusal like an argument I meant to win. Nineveh is evil. Nineveh is cruel. Nineveh deserves judgment. I told myself I was protecting justice, that Yahweh should not waste mercy on an enemy. Then the darkness pressed back with questions that would not soften. If my anger was holy, why did it taste like poison? If I was righteous, why had Yahweh pursued me with a storm? If I was defending justice, why was I the one trapped inside a living grave? Between the slow beats, the truth arrived like iron. I did not run because I loved justice. I ran because I hated mercy. It was never only about Nineveh. It was about control. I wanted God to punish who I hated and spare who I loved. I wanted him to fit inside my idea of fairness, predictable, obedient to my emotions. But Yahweh is not contained by my fairness. The stench thickened, the fish shifted, sickness rose, and I gagged until my throat burned. The air went sour, then dull, then sour again, as if my senses were surrendering one by one. I pressed my forehead against the slick wall and closed my eyes, as if blindness could make it less real. And beneath the sickness came fear, the kind that makes you see what you are. Not fear of Nineveh, fear of the Lord himself. If he can command wind, turn waves into weapons, appoint a creature of the deep to swallow a man and keep him breathing, then what am I? A breath, a piece of dust that decided to fight. My heart finally gave way. I stopped pretending rebellion could be justified by moral language. I saw myself stripped bare, a prophet demanding mercy for Israel while refusing it for others, angry at grace because it would not take orders from me. And I remembered the captain's command, the one that followed me from deck to darkness: call on your God. Now there was nowhere left to run. No ship, no crowd, only me and Yahweh. I tried to speak to him without praying, the way a stubborn man avoids surrender. You could have chosen someone else, I muttered into the damp air. No answer.
Call on your God.
Now there's nowhere left to run.
You know what they are, I said, thinking of Nineveh. No answer. Then the thought that cut deepest came, quiet and unavoidable. He knows what I am too. My breathing quickened, not because the fish squeezed me, but because my mind squeezed itself. So I forced my breath slow, in, out, and at last I prayed. The first sound was not a sentence, it was a broken breath. In that breath I understood the deep was undoing me, pressing me down until the only thing I could reach was the mercy I resented. Between the slow beats I admitted, I cannot save myself. The words disappeared into wet walls, but they cracked something open. Admitting weakness is the first place grace can enter. After a while, the dark stopped feeling like a place and started feeling like a verdict. I could not measure anything. I could not tell if we were rising or sinking, if I had been here a night or a lifetime. My thoughts circled the same ugly truth like a trapped bird. I had run from Yahweh, and now Yahweh had run me out of road. I am still here, I whispered. It sounded foolish, like announcing yourself to a mountain.
I cannot save myself.
The fish answered with its heavy pulse, as if time itself was breathing. Thump, thump. In that darkness, every idol failed fast. Anger could not give me air. Pride could not open a door. Reputation meant nothing inside a tomb. Only the Lord remained, and that was what frightened me, because I had been fighting him like he was a man. Then the question returned, sharper each time I tried to ignore it. Why 3 days? Not a moment, not one night. 3 days, long enough for pride to starve, long enough for something inside to die without my body dying. I did not know the reason, but I could feel it was not random. Yahweh does not waste darkness. So I prayed, not to impress, not to perform, only to survive. I called because of my affliction to Yahweh, and he answered me. I whispered. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried. You heard my voice. Sheol, the land of the dead. That was what this felt like, separation and finality. Yet the miracle was not that I could pray, it was that he listened. So I named the truth, for you threw me into the depth, in the heart of the seas. Memory flashed, water closing over my head, light tearing apart, weeds tightening like hands. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Then the confession I feared most. I have been banished from your sight. My chest tightened, because being cut off was worse than drowning. And then hope, unexpected as light in a sealed room. Yet I will look again toward your holy temple. I did not know how. I was still inside this moving tomb, but something in me refused to believe the door was closed forever. The waters surrounded me, even to the soul. The deep was around me, the weeds were wrapped around my head. I could still feel their cold touch. I went down to the bottoms of the mountains. The earth with its bars closed on me forever, forever. That is what drowning tastes like. Then the line that broke me open. Yet you have brought up my life from the pit, Yahweh my God. I said it as if it had already happened, because prayer makes deliverance begin before deliverance appears. When my soul fainted within me, I remembered Yahweh, I whispered, and my prayer came into you, into your holy temple.
Yet I will look again toward your holy temple. Even here, I felt him. The deep had not shut him out.
I did not know how prayer could pass through miles of water and flesh, but I believed that it could. I could feel his attention, as real as the stench and the heat. I was still alive. The deep had not shut him out. The fish's heart kept beating, thump, thump. Between those slow blows, my mind went back to the deck, to the drenched sailors staring at a sea gone still, their terror giving way to reverence. Strangers had been driven toward the Lord by my rebellion. Even my sin had opened a door for someone else. That thought struck deep. I, who had refused to carry mercy to Nineveh, had watched mercy reach pagans on a ship. My pride broke apart. I saw the idol hidden under my anger. It was not justice. It was the belief that I could decide who deserved patience, that I could draw a boundary around grace. So I whispered the words as they came, feeling their truth on my tongue. Those who regard lying vanities forsake their own mercy. I thought of carved gods, and then of the idols I carried with no wood in them at all. Resentment, national pride, the need to control God's goodness, empty things. Yet I had held to them until they dragged me into the sea. A quiet came over me, not comfort, surrender. And I prayed again, my voice scraping out of my throat. But I will sacrifice to you with the voice of thanksgiving. I will pay that which I have vowed. Then came the line that turned my life on its hinge.
Salvation belongs to Yahweh.
Not to my plans, not to my anger, not to my nation, to him. The moment I said it, the living tomb changed. The pressure in the walls shifted, as if the creature had heard a command it had been waiting for. The heartbeat stayed steady, but the whole chamber began to move with purpose. I listened to the sea rushing outside and felt, without seeing, that we were rising. And with that rising came a new fear, quieter than panic but sharper than dread. If the Lord was bringing me up, then the road to Nineveh was opening again. The walls tightened, the fish turned, then it convulsed. Darkness heaved. Bitter water rushed around my legs, then my chest. I choked as the air turned foul and thin, the chamber clenching as though it meant to cast me out. It did. I was hurled through brine and bile into air that tasted of freedom and shame. My body slammed into sand. I rolled, coughing until my ribs hurt, dragging clean breath into lungs that had forgotten it. Light stabbed my eyes. Sky, shore, waves, a smear of green sea beyond. Behind me, the great fish surfaced once, a dark mass against the water, then turned and slipped back into the deep like a servant dismissed. I lay there trembling, slick with slime, my hair heavy with salt. The wind scraped across my face, and it felt like the first honest touch in days. I wanted to laugh and weep, but my throat could only rasp. I was alive, and I had not earned it. The words still rang through my bones. Salvation belongs to Yahweh. When I finally pushed myself up, my hands were shaking, sand clung to my skin, my clothes hung heavy and ruined. I took a few steps and nearly fell, dizzy, as if my body still expected the world to shift like water. A fisherman appeared down the shore with nets over his shoulder. He slowed, wary, keeping his distance. "What are you?" he called. "What are you?"
A man who was spared.
"A man," I said, my voice breaking. "A man who was spared. Spared from what?" I looked out at the sea. From myself. He studied me, then pointed inland. "Water, food, the road is that way." When he left, the loneliness came back, but it felt like a narrow path opening. Because the moment I stood on dry land, the word of the Lord came again. Not as thunder, not as accusation. The same clear command, given like a second breath. "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and preach to it the message that I give you." No scolding, no list of failures, only the mission. The old anger stirred like a wound remembering pain. Yet the deep had crushed something stubborn in me until only truth remained. If salvation belongs to Yahweh, then obedience was not a negotiation. It was a return. I did not feel brave. I did not feel clean. But I felt the weight of my vow, so I turned my face east. Days passed in aching miles. Dust roads, fields, small villages, travelers who glanced at me and then looked away, as if they sensed I carried something they did not want to touch. At night, I lay beneath the open sky and listened to the wind, and sometimes it sounded like the echo of the storm, reminding me how small a ship is when God decides to speak. The farther east I went, the more the shadow returned. Assyria, Nineveh. It rose in my thoughts like a wall before it ever rose on the horizon. My mouth went dry, not only from fear, but from the knowledge that my words could change the fate of a city I had once wanted erased. And I understood that the deeper enemy I was walking toward was not only beyond those gates, it was in me. Then Nineveh rose, not like a village, but like a world. Stone climbed against the sky, walls thick enough to make a man feel small before he entered. Roads crowded with traders and soldiers, servants and herds, voices harsh and foreign. Every step closer stirred old hatred, but the deep had marked me. I entered with one sentence as my only shield: salvation belongs to Yahweh. No escort, no banner, only a foreigner with the memory of salt still burning in his eyes. After a day's walk into the heart of the city, I stopped where people could gather, where roads crossed and voices rose and fell like waves. Eyes found me, suspicion first, then curiosity, then that sharp attention given to a stranger who stands too still. I drew a breath. The air smelled of smoke, animals, sweat, spice, and power. Then I spoke what God had given me. Yet 40 days, and Nineveh will be overthrown. No explanation, no argument, only a sentence with a clock inside it. For one heartbeat, nothing. A soldier smirked. A merchant frowned. Then I saw it, the flicker, guilt recognized, confidence thinning. The words moved away from me like fire taking dry grass. 40 days, overthrown. A Hebrew. Look at his eyes. Some laughed, some cursed, some turned and walked away. But enough stayed, enough listened, enough looked afraid.
Yet 40 days, and Nineveh will be overthrown.
By evening, the mood in Nineveh had begun to change. Not all at once, but like a storm front moving in. Conversations grew heavier, footsteps quickened, faces turned inward. The next morning I saw sackcloth, coarse cloth draped over shoulders that had known fine garments. Heads bowed low, markets quieter than before. Word spread that the city was fasting, not for a feast, not for display, but because my warning had lodged a question in them that would not let go. What if it is true? What if heaven has spoken? The message reached the great houses and the halls of power. And when it reached the king, I expected pride, threats, chains. Instead, he rose from his throne, took off his royal robe, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat down in ashes. A man does that only when he believes he may lose everything. Then a decree ran through the streets and out through the gates. No one was to eat. No one was to drink, not man, not beast. Herds were gathered in, hungry and restless, making repentance impossible to ignore. The city looked like mourning, and in that decree was the line that told me their hearts were truly turning.
Who knows whether God will not turn and relent and turn away from his fierce anger, so that we might not perish.
Let them turn everyone from his evil way, not sorrow alone, turning. Then the king's plea spread through the city like a tremor. Who knows whether God will not turn and relent and turn away from his fierce anger, that we not perish? Who knows? Not certainty, not entitlement, only a desperate hope that Yahweh might hear. As I walked those streets, the number in my warning began to beat inside my mind. 40 days, loud as thunder under my ribs. My stomach tightened, because I understood what I was seeing. This was my nightmare. Not that they would mock me, not that they would kill me, but that they would listen. Because if they listened, Yahweh might do what I had feared from the beginning. He might show mercy. Days passed. Nineveh did not become holy in a single night. Guards still gripped their spears like men shaped by power. Merchants still kept watch over their goods, but sackcloth remained on backs. Ash stayed on skin, and low prayers rose from mouths that had once bowed to idols. The whole city waited, holding its breath, asking the same question again and again. Who knows? I hated how much it sounded like faith because I knew Yahweh. I had run because I knew his heart, You are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness. Watching Nineveh bow itself low, I realized my warning had opened a door, not in the city, but in heaven.
Is it right for you to be angry?
Ah, now, Yahweh, wasn't this what I said? I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful.
Then the whisper became certainty. God had seen their turning. The disaster was not coming. He relented. No trumpet, no spectacle, only the slow lifting of dread. People raised their heads. The fast began to loosen. Even the air felt lighter. Nineveh was spared. For a heartbeat, the part of me that had prayed in the deep tried to answer with gratitude. Then the older part rose up again, the part that fled toward Tarshish, the part that wanted the world to match my anger. Mercy falling on them felt like the world set in the wrong order. So I accused God. Away from the crowds, I spoke upward, raw and bitter. Ah, now, Yahweh, wasn't this what I said when I was yet in my country? Therefore I hurried to flee to Tarshish. At last I named the truth beneath all my excuses. I ran because I knew he would be merciful. I wanted the right to decide who deserved mercy, and Yahweh would not place that power in my hands. My anger turned desperate, and I said words that should shame a prophet. Therefore now, Yahweh, take, I beg you, my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. Then Yahweh answered, not with wrath, but with a question that left me nowhere to hide. Is it right for you to be angry? I had no answer, because the honest one would have named my anger for what it was. So I withdrew. I went out from the city and sat east of Nineveh, where the walls were still in view, and I made for myself a small shelter of branches and cloth. I sat beneath it and watched the smoke rise from cooking fires, watched life continue behind the gates, and felt my anger feed on itself. This should not be. They should pay. They should learn. But the sky remained clear. No fire, no sign, only silence. And in that silence, the two questions came back, sharper than before. Why had Yahweh chosen me for this city, knowing my heart would resist him? Why those days in darkness, if not to break what in me still refused to break? Heat pressed down, sweat ran into my eyes. I kept staring as though my gaze could call down judgment. Then the ground beside me stirred. Not wind, something small and steady, like growth speaking in a whisper. I turned and saw green rising out of the dust, as if Yahweh was about to answer his own question in a way I would not be able to ignore.
Green rose out of dust like an answer I couldn't ignore.
Green rose beside me, and I knew the Lord was about to teach me without thunder. Mercy has a sound when you are waiting for fire. It is the soft, unbearable return of ordinary life, the way voices rise again, the way a city that deserved to be crushed dares to breathe as though tomorrow still belongs to it.
Mercy has a sound, its ordinary life returning.
When I understood that Nineveh would not fall, something twisted inside me. I had delivered the sentence with a clock inside it. I had watched sackcloth and ashes swallow pride, and then I watched the dread lift, because Yahweh saw them turn, and he did not do what I wanted him to do. I wish I could tell you I stood there and praised him. I did not. I felt robbed, as if justice had been taken in broad daylight. Anger rose so quickly it tasted like heat. It was the same old sickness that had sent me running to the sea, only now it called itself devotion, pretending it was defending the honor of my people. So I left the city. I went east of the walls until the voices faded, until Nineveh was no longer around me but below me, stones stacked against the horizon like a threat that refused to die. From that rise, I could see smoke lifting from cooking fires, gates opening and closing, movement steady as breath. The city was alive, and the fact that it was alive felt like an insult. I told myself I would wait out the 40 days. I told myself I would watch, as though my watching mattered, as though my disappointment could draw judgment down from heaven. Every hour that passed felt like a verdict against me. Every time laughter drifted up from the streets, it scraped something raw inside my chest.
Is it right for you to be angry?
I have no answer.
I found a patch of ground where the sun struck hard and built a shelter with my own hands. Branches, cloth, whatever I could gather. It was crooked and thin, but it threw a little shadow, and that shadow felt like the only thing in my life I had made by my own will. Then I sat down and waited. I told myself I was waiting to see what Yahweh would do. The truer thing was darker. Part of me still hoped he would change his mind. After the deep, after the prayer, after the mercy that had kept me alive, I still wanted vengeance to have the final word. The day dragged. I could not escape the thought that the city's repentance had cost me something I did not want to lose: my certainty. If Nineveh could turn, then my hatred had nowhere left to hide. If Yahweh could spare them, then the lines I drew in my mind were not lines he recognized. The same God who calmed the sea for pagan sailors could calm his wrath over Assyria too. And that thought left me exposed, like a man whose secret has been spoken aloud in the street. So I kept watching, as though watching could rebuild the world the way I wanted it. Heat pressed down like a hand. Dust clung to sweat. The wind crossing my face felt dry and impatient.
I'm glad, and I hate that I'm glad.
As if it had forgotten the sea, I watched the walls and tried to read every shift of light as a sign. If a cloud crossed the sun, my heart jumped. If the sky stayed clear, bitterness rose again. And the two questions from the deep came back to me, not like puzzles, but like wounds. Why did Yahweh choose me for Nineveh, knowing my heart would resist him? Why were my days measured in darkness, if not to break what still refused to break? I remembered the fish's heartbeat, slow and immense. I remembered the moment I said, "Salvation belongs to Yahweh." It had been true in the deep, and now I wanted to renegotiate it on land, because if salvation belongs to him, then mercy belongs to him too. He gives it where he wills. That freedom offended the part of me that wanted God to serve my sense of fairness. I tried to pray. The words came, then died. I tried to rehearse my reasons. They had crushed nations. They had made the earth tremble.
The shade, it's leaving me.
I wanted to count every wound my people carried beneath Assyria's shadow, as if a list could force God's hand. But every argument ended the same way, in a silence that did not applaud me. And in that silence I heard the Lord's question, quiet and terrible, the kind that does not need volume to break a man. Is it right for you to be angry? It was not a threat, it was a mirror. I did not answer. I stared at the city and pretended the problem was out there, behind those gates, in those streets, in those people. I told myself the Lord was being soft. I told myself mercy was weakness. I told myself I was the one who saw clearly, even while my own heart was hardening into stone. Evening crept in. From below came the ordinary sounds returning. A child's laugh carried on the wind, a donkey's call, voices from rooftop to rooftop. Life creeping back into a place that should have been ash. If they are spared, what does that say about our suffering?
I can't bear this anymore.
If they are forgiven, what does that make of our fear? Those thoughts were poison, and I drank them anyway because they made me feel certain. Night came, stars spread above me like indifferent eyes. I lay beneath my poor shelter and listened for any sign that Yahweh would prove my anger right. I listened for thunder, I listened for a scream carried on the wind. I listened until the silence felt personal. Only the wind answered. Sometime before dawn, exhaustion pulled me under, the heavy sleep of a man who believed he had earned the right to be angry and still be cared for.
You pity the plant.
I do. I pity it because it shaded me.
When I woke, the light was pale and thin. Nineveh still stood, smoke still lifted, life still moved. The sun began to climb, heat returned. I wiped my face and stared down at the city, and for a moment the anger felt tired, like a weapon too heavy to raise. Then it flared again, because pride does not retire quietly. I rubbed sand between my fingers and felt how easily it fell apart. That was what I feared, that my righteousness would crumble the same way, grain by grain, until only truth remained. The hill was silent, but it was not empty. At first I did not notice the ground. I was watching the walls, the gates, the movement of men and animals, waiting for judgment the way a man watches the horizon for war. Then, beside me, the dust shifted. The green rose quickly.
Shouldn't I pity Nineveh, that great city?
As though the earth had been hiding it for that exact moment. One day the hill was bare and bitter, my shelter thin and crooked, the sun beating down on my head like a warning. Then, as the heat climbed and my patience thinned, leaves unfurled beside me, broad and alive, spreading shade where my own hands could not. At first I watched it with narrowed eyes, suspicious of anything that entered my life too quickly. But the shade was real.
In which are more than 120,000 persons who can't discern between their right hand and their left hand, and also much cattle.
Even them, even the ones who don't know, and the cattle too.
Coolness settled over my shoulders. The air beneath the leaves felt softer, calmer, almost gentle. For the first time since Nineveh had spared itself by repentance, the tightness in my body loosened. I breathed out and only then realized how shallow my breathing had been. Because at last the breath went deep, I leaned back and let the shadow cover my face. And shamefully, honestly, I was glad. Not glad that a city lived, glad that I was comfortable. My anger had made me small, but comfort made me forget how small I was. I ran my fingers along the edge of a leaf. It was thick, smooth, cool beneath its own shade. The plant stood there like a private mercy, as if the Lord had remembered me in my sulking. I could almost hear myself justifying it. See, the Lord still cares for me. The Lord still knows what I need. The Lord still honors his prophet. Those thoughts felt warm because they fed the part of me that wanted to be at the center. The part that wanted my feelings to measure what was right. The city below kept breathing. Smoke drifted up from its homes. Life went on behind the walls.
Then teach me, Yahweh. Teach me what my anger won't let me see.
I watched it through slits of shadow and told myself I was waiting for judgment, but my body was enjoying the shade. Then night came, the heat eased, and I slept. It was not the deep sleep of denial from the ship. It was a tired sleep, the sleep of a man who believed he had earned the right to be angry and still be cared for. My last thought before darkness took me was the plant above me, its leaves like a roof built by hands I did not see. At dawn, something had changed. I woke to thinner light. The air felt sharper. The shade was no longer as deep. I blinked, confused, and lifted my head. The leaves above me were drooping. Not gradually, not with the slow sadness of something dying over time, but with sudden weakness, as if life had been bitten out of it. I sat up, and the sun struck my face harder than it should have at that hour. I reached up and touched a leaf, and it felt limp, spent. My stomach tightened. I searched along the stem and saw a small movement, almost nothing. A worm, hidden and relentless, working at the base where strength becomes vulnerability. It did not look impressive. It looked harmless, but it was doing quietly what storms do in the open. It was taking away what I had leaned on. By the time the sun climbed higher, the plant was already withering. Its color dulled, the leaves curled, the shade thinned until it was only the ghost of cover. Then the wind came. Not a cool breeze off the sea, not a gentle stirring. A hot east wind, dry and relentless, sweeping across the hill like breath from a furnace. It drove dust into my eyes. It dried my mouth at once. The sun pressed down, merciless and bright, and the shelter I had built with my own hands seemed to shrink beneath the heat. The plant, the mercy I had enjoyed, was gone, and the loss of it struck me with a force that exposed me. My anger surged again, sudden, childish, fierce. I felt it in my chest, in my jaw, in the way my hands clenched before I knew it. Bitterness rose in my mouth. I stood, and the world swayed. Heat shimmered up from the ground. My head pounded. My sight narrowed, and for a moment I thought I might collapse there on the hill like a man defeated by nothing more than weather.
Shouldn't I pity Nineveh, that great city, and also much cattle?
You are Yahweh, and I am not.
I did not want to admit how much the plant had mattered to me until it was gone. That is how comfort works. It feels like a right until it becomes a lesson. I staggered back into the poor shadow of my shelter, but it did little. The wind found me anyway. The sun found me anyway. Sweat ran down my neck. My throat felt like dry cloth. Then the words came out of me again, the same ugly words that had risen when Nineveh was spared. It is better for me to die than to live. I said it into the heat like a curse, like a plea, like a man who had no other way to speak his loss except surrender. The city below went on living. The walls stood, smoke drifted, the people moved, unaware of my private crisis on a hill. And I felt alone, not in distance, but in spirit. Alone in my anger, alone in my stubbornness, alone in the smallness I did not want to see. Then the Lord spoke again, not as thunder, not as judgment, as a question. Is it right for you to be angry about the plant? The words carried the same calm he had used when I accused him for sparing Nineveh, the same steadiness, the same patient weight that this time he placed the question in my hands while the plant still died beside me, while the heat burned my skin, while my selfish grief lay open for me to see. I did not answer like a humbled man. I answered like a man cornered by truth. Yes, I snapped, and my voice was sharp enough to wound myself. It is right, even to death. As soon as I said it, I felt how ridiculous it sounded, and how honest it was at the same time. I was not angry over the plant. Not truly. I was angry because I did not get to keep what made me comfortable. I was angry because mercy did not follow my preferences. I was angry because God's goodness did not belong to me as property. The heat pressed on, and the wind hissed through dead leaves. The worm was gone, hidden again, its work complete. The plant drooped like a body without breath. The Lord let the moment hang long enough to sting. Then he spoke, and his words did not strike like a sword. They struck like a mirror held too close. You pity the plant, he said. Pity, that word turned inside me, because it was true. I grieved for a plant as though it were a loss too deep to bear.
It was never mine, not the shade, not the mercy, not even the breath to grieve it.
You pity the plant, the Lord continued, for which you did not labor, nor did you make it grow. I swallowed. My mouth was dry. My eyes burned. The sentence was simple, but it carried weight. I had not planted it. I had not watered it. I had not guarded it. It had been given. And it came up in a night, the Lord said, and perished in a night. I looked at the withered leaves, and my throat tightened. It was a terrible thing how quickly mercy can appear and how quickly it can vanish, and how exposed a man becomes when he realizes it was never his to own. The Lord's voice did not rise. It did not accuse. It only moved deeper, closer to the center of me, to the place I had guarded since the command first came in Israel. And should not I pity Nineveh, he said. The city's name struck my chest the way it had before, but this time it did not ignite outrage so quickly. It landed with a different weight. And should not I pity Nineveh, the Lord said again, steady as the sun, that great city. The hot wind moved across my face. Dust clung to sweat. My hands trembled, and I did not know whether it was the heat or something deeper. In which are more than 120,000 persons, the Lord said, who don't know their right hand from their left. I stared toward Nineveh's walls, and my anger faltered, not gone, but challenged.
Shouldn't I be concerned for Nineveh, that great city?
You are right, Yahweh. I have no defense.
The Lord was not speaking of their power. He was speaking of their lostness, not excusing evil, but naming blindness. And also much livestock, he said, even the animals. Even what I would have counted as small. I stood there in the heat, and his words began to draw together in my mind like threads pulled tight. I had grieved a plant because it gave me shade. The Lord grieved a city because it held souls. And suddenly the two questions from the deep stirred again. No longer distant mysteries, but living things pressing against the inside of my chest. Why did the Lord choose me for Nineveh? Why did he choose 3 days in the belly of Sheol? The hot wind blew, and the dead leaves scraped against each other, and I felt as though the deep itself were rising inside me again, bringing back the taste of darkness, the crush of being trapped, the terror of believing I was cut off. Because I realized the Lord was not speaking only about Nineveh, he was speaking about me. He was pointing at my heart the way the lot had pointed at me on the ship, the way the storm had marked me, the way the fish had held me. And in that final question, standing between a dead plant and a living city, I heard something that sounded like a door beginning to open inside my soul.
Teach my heart what my mouth could not. Bend what is stubborn in me, and leave me in your mercy.